Buongiorno, principessa. Just kidding. Hi, everyone. Welcome, 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 welcome. Benvenuti a tutti alle Olimpiadi delle Vendite a Freddo. Io mi chiamo Rebecca. Welcome today to the Cold Sales Olympics, Winter Olympics. I hope everyone is doing wonderful. It is Friday the 13th. Yeah, this has got an omen on it. And this is my last day in this apartment too. So I'm like hoping, this apartment has been wonderful so far. So I'm hoping that maybe, I don't know, like the hot water gods or like something, the Italian gods will frown upon me and something will happen. But happy Friday the 13th to everyone who's out there. I want to see how everyone's going on. If you're jump in the chat and say hello and where you're coming in from. Today we are going to cover oggi. We are going to cover a very logistical topic. So this is probably going to be a very helpful topic for AEs, or at least I hope that it is. It was a helpful topic for me to uncover and think about as an AE, but it is my first official day in the life video. But of course, me being me, it's going to be a day in the life of a top performing AE. So we're not going to go through what I had for breakfast and my workout this morning. We're going to go through and what I do for my posts before I go to bed routine. We're going to go into the day of a life of a top performing AE, just from a logistical sense. What should you do? When should you do it? So that you can build the habits and focus on the inputs to be a top performer. So let's go ahead and jump into the first slice of pizza pie. So the first thing I wanted to cover today is what to do and learn, essentially, that drastically is going to improve conversion. So the number one thing for sure, by far, that you can do as an AE, I would argue as an SDR as well, but certainly as an AE, that will drastically improve your conversion, and I mean this, is to learn your buyer. So if you can't, and what I mean by that is if you can't close your eyes right now and think of, let's say that you have 3 or 4 buyers, if you can't close your eyes and name at least at bare minimum what they're metriced on, what the industry average of that is, and at what point that it's a problem. So like, for instance, you would think if you didn't know baseball that well, you would think a batting average of like 0.3, for instance, or 0.4 is really, really low. You're like, well, that's failing. That's 40% because you don't know baseball. But like for the actual buyer themselves, for let's do an example, so like IT director for server uptime, what is normal? So industry average is 9.9 and 2 nines, and where companies strive to perform is 9.9 and 4 nines. Right? So a 92% for server uptime isn't good, even though you would think a 92 is like hypothetically an A, right? So what I mean by learning your buyer is putting in the time and putting in the intentional effort. What I will say is it is much quicker than you think, but to get to know the buyer and the world and the entire existence and environment of your buyer is the smartest thing that you can do as an AE. So buyers are very simple. If you know a lot, they want to talk to you a lot. If you know nothing, they don't want to talk to you at all. It is that digital. So the more that you know about their environment, not just about your product, I would say almost exclusively not your product, of like what they're trying to do is solve their problems and get ahead of problems that they don't even know about, and that ones that are going to be in the future, and essentially be successful in their role regardless of what you do. Right? So the more that they can learn on how to solve their problem, I mean, this would be a great example of this, of like, hypothetically, I would think that people showed up today because they want to learn how to do their job more effectively. So your buyer's trying to do the exact same thing. So if you can find things in their day that they believe that aren't true, or that they've missed, or that you, or even ways to do something, an article on, the top 20 things that the top 20 questions that you should be asking in 2026, et cetera, the more value that you can add and the more things that you can add to your buyer's day in terms of knowledge set, the better. And essentially when I was first starting out, and then when I started selling into more technical buyer personas like CFO, CISO, CIO, IT director, network security architect. I come from a family of engineers. My dad is a mechanical engineer, and he built the fins on missile heads for the government in the defense division for 35 years at Texas Instruments and Raytheon. My mom's a biology professor. My brother is a PhD electrical engineer that works on transformers. And my sister is a medical doctor. She's a ER doctor down at Baylor. And I'm in sales. So what that means is they are all very technical. I come from an extremely technical family. And all of it, even though in my head, like growing up, it was very, like they're very into science and that's a world that I don't understand. To bridge that gap, even between the different like sciences, so to speak, of like electrical engineer to my dad's mechanical engineer to my brother-in-law as a civil engineer. I mean, their disciplines couldn't be more disciplined from the own horse's mouth of what they say. So how you can learn about their day without, so my thought pattern when I was like first coming into selling to technical buyer personas is like, well, if I'm not a CIO and I'm not a mechanical engineer, or I'm not a, CISO, and I never have been, how on earth can I know things that they don't? And the good news is just because you have a body doesn't mean that you know the average blood pulse, or the average heart rate, or the average BMI, or the average height for your gender, or the average age, or the average lifespan. So you probably, at least I can't name all of those stats, even though I'm a human and I have a human body. Just because I'm a seller doesn't mean that I know the average conversion rate for MarTech versus FinTech, or inbound versus outbound. It's 6 and 35% respectively, or the average open rate, or the average reply rate, or the average unsubscribe rate, or how much data decay that you have per month. So, I mean, learning the answers to those and knowing those answers inherently are two completely different things. So usually when someone is in the role, like if you can name all those stats that for yourself that I just named, then good for you. You are certainly the outlier. So the good news in that is just because your buyer is a CIO doesn't mean that they know everything, or doesn't mean that they know, much stats or benchmarks or industry averages at all. So the thing that I would do to essentially really help my buyer is learn about them aggressively. So I'm going to give you a couple mechanisms how you can do that. The first thing by far and foremost that I would do is I would go to ChatGPT or any kind of AI engine, and I would essentially search for the top 3 lagging indicators. The prompt that I would give is, give me the top 3 lagging indicators for, let's do a CIO. Give me the top 3 lagging indicators for a CIO, and the industry average of those lagging indicators, and at what point they're usually a problem for a CIO, and then search that, and it'll bring something up. And usually it'll bring the top 3. And the extra step you can add in is, I would say, which one of these 3 is usually most important. And so let's say, for instance, I did that one yesterday because I was working with a client with a CIO, and it was the number of security breaches for a CISO. I'm like, got it. The next search that I would make is for, give me the top 20 leading and leaning indicator KPIs for a CIO that cause an increase or decrease in number of security breaches, the industry average of those KPIs, and at what point they cause a problem with the number increase or decrease of number of security breaches. So let's do another one of CFO. There's his gross profit margin. So the second search I would do is, give me the top 20 leading and leaning indicators that cause an increase or decrease in gross profit margin for a CFO, the industry average of those KPIs, and at what point those KPIs cause a problem or cause an increase or decrease in the gross profit margin for a CFO. And once you get that list back, I would memorize it. It is the smartest thing that you can do. So from a habit perspective, I would say I'm going to commit to learning 3 new metrics for my buyer every single week. You're probably out there. I mean, most companies usually are going to have anywhere from 3 to 6 buyers. So I'd pick one buyer in the beginning and say, I'm just going to search those, and I'm going to learn 3 stats per week. Not too many, not too few. If you want to get ahead of it and keep going, I mean, you can retain upwards of 15 to 20 per week, but I would at least start there. The second thing that I would do is I would make it a habit of at least watching one webinar for your buyer. Pick one of the buyers per week. Put it on the background, a podcast while you're running. So I see a lot of people piling into sales, objection handling webinars and on, which is all fine and good. But if you had to pick, if I were to guess, if I had seller A and seller B, and seller A attended a whole bunch of how to sell webinars, and seller B attended a whole bunch of CTO webinars, when they both sell into a CTO, seller B is going to outperform seller A every single time. So I would put an actual calendar reminder in my calendar of 15 minutes per day that I'm going to study my buyer. So you can watch a podcast, you can put on a webinar, you can look up articles, you can look up stats. But I would, if you want to control your outputs, one of the most dangerous things that I don't see people address, if you want to control your outputs, you have to control your inputs. So I put in my calendar, and do not skip it, 15 minutes every single day. And it's buyer learning time. You can do whatever you want, podcast, webinar. It's less important about the channel. It's more important that you actually build that habit and start to learn about them. And then over time, you're going to, like, if you learn 5 stats, you're going to be good. 10, you're going to be great. 15, 20, you're going to be deadly in the room. Not only is that helpful for your buyer, but every single stat that you learn, you add a piece of value to essentially what you could hypothetically add to your buyer's day. And that's another piece of value that your competitors, I guarantee you, is not doing. So the most important thing, 15 minutes a day. I would try to read 1 article and listen to at least 1 podcast per week for one of your buyers. Don't do too much. The main thing you need to mitigate against is quitting. And another tip is I would go to any kind of networking group. So I would start to live, breathe, and eat around people. If you want to learn how to speak French, living in France is a good start. It's not everything. You still have to take class and study grammar and structure, but it's really helpful when you're around the buyer. So the most important habit for sure, and you will see drastic results. I mean this, drastic results, that all of a sudden your buyer, the conversations are going to turn upside down in that room when you start to get to know them and the different things that they're after. So 15 minutes a day, learn about any single buyer that you want, podcast, article, but especially statistics, industry averages, and what point they cause a problem, 15 minutes a day. And after a month, you're going to see results that out of your wildest dreams. I'm trying to time it perfectly. I'm not very good at the buzzer. I'm usually like way over or way under. I'm not a good forecaster in terms of the buzzer, but that is, my heart's like beating fast. That is the most important thing to do as an AE. I mean, there was some other things that we're going to go into, but for sure, if you want to kill it as an AE, there is one. You just have to outlearn everyone else on your team, outlearn your own buyer, outlearn your competitors. You do that, you'll be fine. From me to you, I guarantee people are going to fight to have you around if you do that. If you don't do that, there are some things that you can do to ad hoc get your number there, meaning drive, discipline, activity metrics, However, I'd be remiss if you just become so valuable to where your buyers are, like begging to have you on the line, because they should. All of a sudden you're an actual asset to them. So, okay. So we're going to go into pizza pie slice number 2. So that was educating yourself on buyers. So the second thing I wanted to talk about was buyer follow-up and what to follow up with. So essentially, you have to keep in mind, especially at the beginning, and what I mean by that is right after your first discovery call, I'm trying to get this Milan logo in there. Right after your first discovery call, or from an inbound perspective, when someone just first requests a demo, for instance, this is their first date with you, essentially. Like, this is their first encounter with you. And they're getting to know they're applying what they learned from you as a person to their experience of what they believe you're going to be like on the back end. So I've heard the phrase before. I don't agree with it necessarily, but it says keep your eyes wide open before marriage and then keep them half shut afterwards. Welcome to Texas, growing up in Texas. But essentially, like, their eyes are wide open in terms of how quickly and how readily and how comprehensively do you follow up with them, and do you support them throughout the buyer journey? It's not everything, but it certainly is very impactful. So when you look at the stats for inbound, for instance, they're very clear. Of 70% of buyers are going to end up going with the vendor that gets back to them first, period. No other, there's other qualifications in their head, but it is adding to a feeling for them that you're going to be the one that's taking care of them. So the thing that someone has to essentially believe, or the main hump that they have to get over, you have status quo deals and indecision. Status quo is they don't think the problem's big enough. Indecision is they do, but they still don't. They do think the problem's big enough, but they still don't close anyway. For indecisive deals, they are over, and this is where we're going to lose 60 to 80% of your deals. They are overcome with fear. Fear that they don't have the right product. Fear that there's too much information to disseminate between. But the main fear is outcome uncertainty, that even if I buy this product, and even if it is the right product, I'm not going to be able to use it in a way to be able to achieve my outcome. And so buyers are educating more than ever before. They are looking upwards of 20 different things before they come and talk to a vendor. Forrester did a report, and the lion's share of buyers, the overwhelming lion's share of buyers do research in the process, start process of research, and most of them will not even engage with a seller until they've done research. Because, and if I had to guess why, it's because they don't want influence from the seller, because they know the seller's just going to push them to buy. And they need to educate. They're like, before I buy this thing, I need to figure out how I'm going to use this thing to predict whether I think I'm going to be successful. Because it's a mistake right now that I'm hypothetically going to run into something and I have a problem. That's a mistake. That's a bad situation. The only thing that can make it much worse is if I run the credit card and it still doesn't work. Right. So part of that process, something that you can do to mitigate. Now, people applied a whole bunch of techniques in the past, which I go into in a different session, of trying to sell on cost of inaction, or trying to drill up the fear and putting fear on more fear. And it essentially paralyzes them still, because they're already afraid. What they really need, the only way you can counteract that is by essentially overcoming their fear, by changing the fear into they believe that they can actually do it. So there's two different ways that you can essentially do that. The first way is diagnosing unknowns, which I go into ad nauseum and all the other episodes, is diagnosing unknowns. When you diagnose an unknown, number one, they're more confident that they are going to be able to solve it, because now they have that piece of information. It's one less thing that they didn't know in their head. But number two, they're more confident in you, that if you were the one that found the thing that they didn't know, you know more than they do, so they can have you around. What that has to do with buyer follow-up is, it's one thing is this AE even a value source at all? Do they know anything to help me? The second is, is the AE, how much information did they know? But the third one is, are they actually going to be around? If someone's valuable, but they still won't pick up the phone and I can't get a hold of them, I'm still scared. Why? Because I don't have access to them. So what it reminds me of when I was young, growing up in Texas, we went to the Texas State Fair every single year. And my mom and me, we were constantly into these, random arts and crafts. And I played soccer growing up very aggressively. I played soccer and ran track. And my hair was always falling down all over the place, because I have a lot of hair. Obviously, I still have quite the mane. And when we were at the state fair, we saw this kind of scrunchie that basically could tie everything together so tight to where it held while I was running around at soccer, while I was running around at track. And I was so impressed. And I remember my mom saying at the point, she was like, "Can you teach us how to put it in her hair, though?" Because she wasn't confident that she essentially could do what they just did. So they taught her 3 or 4 times, and she said, "Okay, let's buy it." And lo and behold, sure enough, we got home and we couldn't do it. So the purchase was worthless, essentially. The purchase put us in a worse off position, because now we have less money to do something about it with. So it's not that the scrunchie was ineffective, and it's not hypothetically that they couldn't have done it for us. It's that they weren't around. So buyer follow-up. When you're go through a discovery call, 24 hours, you've got 24 hours to follow up. And what I would follow up with, you don't have to go through a huge garb of this is what we covered, and this is what you said, and this is what I said. I'm like, guys, we got to stop acting like it's a contract. If they say they're in pain, then they contractually have to buy it. They don't. Stop trying to lock them into a mutual action plan of you do this, and then you double back and you're like, why didn't you do this? I'm confused. I thought that you said if we, it's all the wrong ego state, and it's going to hit them in all the wrong, from a psych perspective, wrong ways, and it's not helpful to them. The thing that I would follow up with them with is, you find an unknown, bonus points if it has nothing to do with you, and you follow up quickly with, hey, here's an article of how you can do that, or a referral to someone else. They are convinced that we are only there to help ourselves, because that's accurate. That's usually the truth. So I'm really convincing them through my follow-up that I'm here to help, regardless of whether I get a win in there or not. That's not wine, that's Diet Monster. I don't even drink. Just so everyone knows that I haven't gone full blood Italian. But essentially, in terms of buyer follow-up, it is imperative of you go through a discovery meeting that you, if you owe them anything, plus you're sending them assets within 24 hours. Thanks so much for giving me the time today. I wanted to follow up with a few things that I mentioned I would send, and I would only do the basics. I wouldn't summarize the conversation. They were there, guys. They know. We got to stop summarizing the conversation for them. And like at minute 3:42, you said you were in pain. It doesn't mean that they have to do anything. And the more that we push, the more that they pull away. Right. So I would just say, I want to send you a couple of things that I promised you. I would do this, 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 and this. And oh, by the way, I know that we were talking a little bit about email deliverability. Here's where you can go for that. And here's an article of how you can look up domain health and DNS score. Either way, thanks so much for the time. I'll see you on Thursday. And you can include like a brief on the back end of the, like when you're going to see them next. But the more value that you put in that email, the more things that they didn't know that you include in that email, the more confident that they are that they can solve their problem, that they're going to be successful solving their problem. If they weren't going to be successful, that you'd be able to assess that situation. You're like, you're not going to make that jump. You have the integrity to tell them, because you're not after your own good, because you're pursuing and finding things that have nothing to do with you and aren't a win for you. So you're focused there, and that you're going to be there for them when they need you most. We bought that scrunchie and we never used it again. Now, that was a small purchase. That's B2C, right? But we're talking about a huge purchase. And you have to keep in mind, the market's not great. People are putting their butts and their jobs on the line when they're making a purchase and signing with us. I take it as a personal responsibility every single time that I have a client with the decision maker in specific of like, I need to make it to where this was a no-brainer, great decision, because it's digital. It's either a great decision and they are pinned with that reputation internally, or it wasn't and they're pinned with that. So I take that personal responsibility of, I need to make sure that was a great decision. So 24 hours afterwards with things that you owe them, a piece of content on one of the unknowns that you found, or a place that you can send them. And then a brief of like, I'll see you on Thursday. Thanks so much for the help. And I'm here if there's anything that you need at all in the meantime. So the second most critical thing, you've got buyer knowledge and learning that, but the second most critical thing is that you are timely with your follow-ups. I know reps, top performing reps, more top performing reps than I would know of the other category of they just know a lot about their buyer. The one thing that they're good about is follow-up. It is crazy. Like a lot of top performers that I know, I'm like, they don't ask any questions. They don't do anything miraculous, but they follow up, and they follow up readily, and they follow up aggressively, and they're there. So buyers more, sure with them than they are with someone who knows a lot, but isn't going to be around whenever they call or trying to get a hold of them. I'm always pumped when I hit the marker. I get it. I have the reputation for talking a lot. I like to talk. Well, I'm just detailed. Like, to my defense, people are like, oh, Beck always talks a lot. I'm like, wait. I never call anyone literally about anything. I'm an introvert. I keep to myself, and I don't call anyone. However, I'm a thinking introvert. I'm a weird category called a thinking introvert. We like books, studying, concept creating. So when I am talking, I'm talking about a topic that I really care about, y'all. Okay, so I'm always pumped for myself. I feel like I'm proving all the haters wrong that I can stay actually on time. The problem was the clock, really. Now the pizza slices are bigger. Okay, so let's go into the third pizza slice of a top performing AE. So now we've gone into learning about your buyer, and that being the most important. The second is buyer follow-up within 24 hours. The third that I wanted to go into is how to protect your day against non-revenue generating activities and how to structure your day. This is a very important one. So, the interesting thing is, one of the things I think that AEs take to heart too much is you're like, I want to protect my calendar from inbound junk, whatever it is. And so, but if you look at the stats, the average amount of people who request a demo who actually just get a first conversation with an AE is the highest I've ever seen is 22%. The lowest I've ever seen is 4%. It is on average 9%. 9% of people are just getting a first call with the AE. Keep in mind, outbound converts at 6%, inbound converts at 35%. And 70% of people are going to go with the vendor gets back to them first. Like, I wouldn't be protecting my calendar. Like, But so we put in all these arduous process, the reason that those numbers are so low is we put in all this arduous process to protect the AE's calendars. I'm like, what, from quota? The thing that I would be worried about, that I would protect my calendar against for sure, and I'm going to get blown up for this. And to my credit, if you look at I'm known as prison callback. If I was in prison and I only had one call to make, I make that call every single time. Meaning I don't make unnecessary calls, and I don't set unnecessary meetings. I have planned 3 national tours with 0 meetings between vendors. I hate meetings. So the thing that I would protect my calendar against is from junk and from myself and from meetings that don't go anywhere. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. I'm going to get probably destroyed online for this. You're going to be like, no, we need to collaborate. Okay, meeting with your SDR, meeting with marketing, pipeline reviews. If your boss makes you go into one, of course you have to have it. But like coaching, I'm like, am I really getting something out of this coaching? And what I mean by that is both sides should be preparing. The manager should be listening to the call beforehand and coming up with, here are all the notes, here are the top 3 things that you need to do. This is what you did well. And the rep needs to be self-coaching and listening to that call. But the meetings and the tasks and the thing that tricks your brain into thinking that you're working without actually working, I think is one of the most damaging things that gobbles up AE, how effective you are. And it's a slippery slope. Some of it you're asked to do. Some of it, I think people just do naturally. So like an example would be going on LinkedIn. Sorry, LinkedIn, but it's not work. It's not your job, and it's not going to really help you hit quota. Every top performer that I've seen did not have a personal brand, and no people that I knew had a personal brand were a top performer at their org. They were like mutually exclusive, right? Because top performers are focused. All the major creators that I know, meaning like writers, like Dickens, if there was one word to describe him, it was scheduled. So I would focus on, I would try to trim out as many meetings as you can. Marketing meetings, syncs, we need to collaborate. We got to think about going to this event. The best performers that I know, they'll do an event, once a quarter as a favor to marketing, but they're not relishing in it. You have a whole bunch of event flies as, like an AE of like, I'm going to an event and I'm not really there for a specific reason. I don't have meetings set up. So anything that's non-revenue generating, the only non-revenue generating activity that I would think about, like, quote unquote, that's not directly generating revenue is learning about your buyer. That is where I'd invest my time. Everything else can go at startups of like helping build a sales enablement program or helping building the onboarding, or, oh, there's a new rep and I'm going to coach him, or mentoring my SDR and blah, blah, blah. Like, you have to keep in mind, and that all feels good in the moment. Usually I see bottom performers, I'm just going to be candid. Bottom performers wanting to do those activities because that's easy. What's hard is hitting quota. So I would not waste any of my calories of know that, for instance, prospecting is one of the things that can help you build pipeline and hit quota. And if I only have 500 calories to spend, I'm not going to spend 400 on a Dr. Pepper and only have 100 calories left. I'm going to spend them all on protein, right? Because that's what's going to keep me full. So if I only have 500 calories, if I only have 1 extra hour, instead of going on LinkedIn and responding to comments and doing a little collaborative sync and, oh, there's someone that's onboarding, I would use it for prospecting and cold calling. Why? Because that sucks. And I know I'm going to lose all of my calories there. So I would be ever protective of my calendar from internal crap. And I mean that by internal crap of it is a slippery slope. Meetings, it needs to be absolutely necessary. Again, I planned an entire national tour, 12 different stops, venues, food, catering, music, videos, content schedules, who was going to speak, sponsors, on, 0 meetings. 0 meetings. If I can do that, and I promise, and it's not, I'm not saying that as a brag. I'm saying that as that has helped me be effective, is being very protective of my calendar, very protective of my time, my focus, and my attention, and my number one slot. When people personal brand, for instance, one of the main gripes I have about it is that that's their favorite things. That gets all of their attention and their love. And they're like, oh, yeah, and shoot, I have to prospect. I am a runner. I run very regularly. And I've heard this from a lot of people, but when I was back living in San Francisco, I heard it. You hear that, Scooter? We're in Italy, y'all. When I would go up to the gas station or like the convenience store to get my Diet Monster, the old man there, he's really, really sweet. He was like, you run every day. He's like, here's some cookies you need to eat them if you're too skinny. And then he would say, I wish I could run. I just don't have the time like you. And I'm like, and I would always think, I'm like, I'm so bummed for him because he does have the time. Everyone has the time. It's what do you prioritize? In terms of timing for your actual day, you have to keep in mind for self-processing, which you can go into in the middle, or where you're going to go into in the next slice, the next piece of the pie. I would get out any internal stuff that you have to do, meetings that you have to do, and I would be protective over that. I would do Mondays and Tuesdays, especially in the morning. That's when people are the least likely to meet and the least likely to listen to you and the least likely, or you can also craft your outreach then in terms of prospecting, but I wouldn't send it then. I would be ever aggressive about protecting my calendar Wednesday, Thursday, and especially Friday afternoon. That is when you're going to get your best hit times in terms of prospecting. So I'd say I'm going to do any junk, like any internal stuff that I got to get done on Monday morning. If you want to talk to me Monday morning, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, don't even bother calling me. Don't even bother calling. Why? Because that is heat zone. That is when people are available to meet and when they're likely to meet and they're likely to take a cold call. So in terms of my schedule, I would be very, very monomaniacal about is mitigating as little internal stuff as you can. Don't worry about the leadership thing, meaning like, what do I have to do? And having that conversation, focus on destroying your quota. That will make your leader more indebted to you than anything. I mean, there are certainly other attributes that it takes to be an effective leader. But the number one thing, when I thought that I owed it to them, is when they were crushing their quota. I didn't need help with onboarding. I didn't need help with enablement. Of course, that's helpful. What I really needed help is I needed people to do what I hired them to do, which was to smash quota. So in summary, protect against internal stuff, as few meetings as possible as you can, and use prospecting hours. If you're going to do internal stuff, do it on Monday, Tuesday at morning. And the thing that I wouldn't worry about protecting my calendar about is from the inbounds and the quote unquote junk. Hear me out. Yes, there's buyer intent and that matters. Our job as AEs, though, is to create buyer intent. And what I mean by that is finding a problem that they didn't know about. You're not creating a problem that doesn't exist. You're finding one they didn't know about. So it drives me nuts when AEs will say they didn't have buyer intent, they weren't the right ICP, and blah, blah, blah. When you look at the statistical analysis of who people think would be the ideal customer and who actually buys, they're completely different profiles typically. Every single org I've seen that. So I would be more ready to take the call to find the buyer intent that they didn't even know that they had and create that from doing effective discovery. And I would be worried about not letting them have time on my calendar. Oh my gosh, that was a buzzer beater. I don't even think that last sentence was completely grammatically correct, but you get the point. I would take more meetings. Like, you don't know someone with a big problem, even though they don't look like a buyer, I've been surprised. I have been surprised, so I would, instead of airing of, I want to protect my calendar from meetings with external, like prospective clients versus people, AEs protect their calendar from that all day long, but then they don't protect their calendar from internal stuff. I'm like, well, that's not revenue generating. So I would just focus. You never know with those buyers. I have taken an inbound call with an intern at the New York Post, and one of the A's didn't want to take it. They're like, oh, well, this is the intern. So I jump on the call, and it was an intern, but their aunt was a main decision maker, and that was the last day of their internship. And they set up the meeting, closed a massive 7-figure deal, 7-figure deal off of taking that meeting. Why? From an intern. I'm like, what do you think about the intern now? So I would loosen up my reins on them having calendar time for that, and tighten my reins on who else has time from the calendar. Okay. Piece 4. Now we've done what to learn, buyer follow-up, and how to structure your day. Let's talk about prospecting. If you're an AE, you need to prospect, period. I don't care what inbound is sent to you. Hear me out. If nothing else, well, if you're being sent 5 inbound leads, so is everyone else on your team. And you are compared to others on your team, number one. Like, they're not your competitors, they're your teammates. But from a leadership board perspective, a leaderboard perspective, yes, they are. But not only that, put that aside, it develops a habit that is very, very easy to lose. Prospecting is not fun. Everyone knows that. I would argue that people are the same. People have the opinion that they know a lot about email and they know a lot about selling, but that they don't know a lot about cold calls. I think the only difference between those is cold calls, you get the immediate feedback. It's one of the only channels that someone just hangs up on you. I think that you're probably the same in all 3, but you only get the feedback in terms of cold calling. So self prospecting, number one, it helps you sharpen that axe of, like, the difference between a discovery call and a cold call. Even if it's a discovery call that you set up, it's discovery. Like, both scenarios, you need to find an unknown. Both scenarios, you need to add value by finding something that they didn't know, something you believe it's not true, or something that they missed. Both scenarios. The difference between a cold call and discovery call, though, is you have a much shorter time frame to do it, and you have no credibility coming off the bat, and they have a perception that you're just a seller who is talking at them, right? So you're at a bigger disadvantage. If you can learn how to do that extremely well, everything else is going to get so much easier. I would think about it, if you can get good at prospecting, specifically on cold calls, it's like learning how to play ping pong with a spoon. And then when you're on the selling floor, you've got a freaking paddle, right? And so you just smack the ball, like, you're incredibly effective. I was an AE for the first 7 years of my career. I was an enterprise AE. They threw me in right off the bat. There's a floor of $2 million up to $20 million for the ACV for major school district projects and government projects for HVAC retrofits. They threw me in the front end, and I was a seller for 7 years. And then I moved out to the Bay Area, and I was going into tech. I went to spend time with my grandparents because they live there. And I remember thinking at the time, I took a step back from being an AE to be an SDR at 30 years old. And my line of thinking was, number one, I need to understand tech to be able to sell this. But number two, I knew, like, I had prospected a lot, but I knew that that was my weakest spot. And so I'm like, if I can get good, like really lightning good at prospecting, I'm going to be, I'm going to tear the house down. So I took a step back as 30 years old in one of the most expensive cities in the world, certainly in the US. It's tied with Manhattan. If you go, all of New York City, actually San Francisco's worse in terms of cost of living. In Manhattan proper, Manhattan wins. But essentially, I knew that I'm 30 and I'm in one of the most expensive cities in the world. And I am an SDR. What am I doing? But the amount of advantage that gave me, because I'm like, I was in the tank day after day after day, cold call, email, cold call, email, cold call, learning until I got good. And it's very easy to not sharpen that axe and to skip over that skill set of like, okay, I do it for a couple of months as a BDR and I had some indowns, blah, 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 and then I'm an AE and then I'm at sent leads. Like, if you can get good at that, I think number one, that's matched mirror to mirror of you being a good seller, but it is going to make you truly unstoppable. And it's going to give you a realistic picture of how good you actually are versus how good you think you are. When you get on a cold call, if you can't ask 3 questions and find an unknown, they're going to hang up the phone. And so the humility that comes along with that, usually the AEs that are top performers, there's a lot of humility that comes and understanding when it comes to working with their SDR. Why? Because they're prospecting themselves and they know how difficult it is. The people that I see kind of treating their SDRs poorly are the ones that are, they sent leads from them, right? And sitting on their high and mighty, like in my opinion, like, do you have to? No, not necessarily. I mean, I haven't seen a lot of orgs that you shouldn't, meaning that you're overwhelmed with pipe. But even if you are overwhelmed with pipe, you have to keep in mind of like sharpening that axe, learning how to do that, becoming more effective. That is the job, is becoming better and better and better and better and better. I think that it truly, and I might get some churn over this or like heartburn over this, but it is, in my opinion, our moral ethical responsibility as sellers to prospect, to self prospect. Almost every single team that I see, they barely do it, if at all. They do a little bit of networking, blah, 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 but they are not hammering calls, on the phone and sending emails and like actually doing that as a very ritual practice. Why? Because it sucks. So I would say at minimum, and it's kind of like working out. Everyone's going to say like, I just don't have the time, or, and I've heard this back and forth, and I hear this. I'm just laughing because, I work with an enablement sometimes, and like sellers will complain. They're like, well, I need more pipeline. And they're like, okay, well, why don't you self prospect? And they're like, oh, I don't have enough time to do that. And I'm like, well, one of these two things is not true. Either you don't have any time because you're so booked with meetings, you have plenty of pipeline, or you don't have any pipeline and you have plenty of time to develop it. But I would for sure minimum 1 hour a day at minimum that you are self-prospecting. Here's the thing. I know several reps who you couldn't stop them. And those are the kind of people that are going to make it happen. And even though they have half of their day in discovery calls, they are still getting out. And like, everyone's going to hate me for saying this, but it's the truth. They are still making 160 dials per day. Now you could say, well, do we know the buyer back and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I hear that argument totally. I'm personalization at scale, girl. Like, I won't let people reach out without personalization. But I am telling you of like, one of the main things that holds people back, point blank, when I go in and I look at teams and analyze what they're doing, and I'll hear from leadership, they're like, oh, well, they're selling based on this, and this is what they're doing, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, can I see their calls? And when I look into what they're actually doing, it's like, 3 emails a day, or like that's high, honestly, in terms of like prospecting, 0 cold calls a day for sure. And I'm like, well, is the trend, like, hypothetically, is what they're doing working? Do we need to improve on quality? Are they adopting blah, blah? I don't know yet, because right now, all we know is they're not doing anything, and leaders aren't watching that. Don't leave it up to your leader. Don't make your leader be the one that has to enforce an activity metric on you. Make those dials yourself. Keep in mind, 40 dials is only you have about a 10% conversion in terms of connect rate. Now you can do things to increase that, meaning Friday afternoon, you're going to about 4x your connect rate. So if you're only making, let's say, and this is a huge number for AE teams, that I know, 15 dials a day, which is nothing, absolutely nothing, y'all. Let's be honest. That is only going to yield 2 connects maybe. So it's only 2 conversations anyway. So I would say at minimum, you can for sure, if you're doing personalized email, you can get out like the emails that I write are 100% personalized. And I'm one of the only people that I know that writes truly personalized emails. Now I go into how to scale it, in one of the other sessions, but you can get out at minimum as an AE, at minimum 20 personalized emails a day and make 40 calls at least a day. And I would put in that hour and a half of like, we have plenty of time to log on LinkedIn and give our sassy take on day in the life posts, or like, whatever it is. We have plenty of time to argue and bicker with each other about politics. We have plenty of time to keep up with the freaking Kardashians, but we don't have time to prospect. And I know, I get it. It's tough. It's really tough, but you have to do it. You just have to do it. If you want to be good, if you want to be great, you cannot be great if you are not prospecting and learning through that process in self-prospecting as an AE. You cannot be great. So I know it's a huge step and I know it's a pain, but I think it's for sure a must. So I'd say at minimum 1 hour a day, but I'd say 20 emails, 40 calls a day, and make the cold calls especially. That is what will turn you into lethal. You have to get your teeth kicked in. You have to fall 5 times on the hill. You know, Shaun White didn't become Shaun White by never falling. He had to fall until he got a little good. Then he got pretty good, and then he got great. And that's exactly what we need to mirror in our process. Look at that timer. Look at that timer. Man, here's the other thing. And then we're going to go into pizza pie slice 5. If you prospect as an AE and the rest of the team isn't, marketing, your SDRs are going to love you. They're going to think you're a hero. They're going to be like, that person just gets it. I know, and maybe he's watching, and I'm going to give him a shout out. One of the best sellers that I've ever known. His name's Dan Strauss, and I worked with him. And he was constantly prospecting, number one, constantly following up with people. And he was the AE on the team. And I was leading the SDR team. And so when we were at course together. And he was never any problems, meaning he was always working great with SDR. He was always deferring leads of like, no, I'm going to let this person on the team have it. I'm going to let this person on the team have it. And he was a top freaking performer, meaning he was giving leads, no, you first. He was collaborative with his SDR. He gave them all the time that they wanted. He was never any issues with, like, he didn't come to me saying, I need this, I need more pipeline, blah, blah, blah. And because of that, everyone loved him. We wanted to send him more leads. Why? Because he was feeding himself. So it made it more from an emotional perspective, fun, and us want to feed him too, of like, there was that collaborative effort. And so that wasn't the only piece that made him great, but it was certainly one of the pieces. And from an emotional view, everyone loved him internally because he was constantly feeding himself. He was like, I'm going to feed myself if no one gave me anything. And he looked at that pipeline, even though everyone was like mandatorily getting pipeline sent from us. He looked at that as a gift that he didn't own necessarily the rights to. And just that flip, I mean, he is stand out in my head, not only in terms of from an emotional view of who mentored my SDRs and helped me, but also from a leaderboard perspective. He was always atop the leaderboard. Like, it was undeniable. And I have to think that part of that is because of his heart towards prospecting, his heart towards accountability of, I'm going to make it happen, regardless of what you do. Okay, so let's go into, shout out Dan Strauss if you're watching this. So why don't we go into pizza pie slice 2, when to do account research and how much. Okay, account research is, it's important for sure. Knowing the company, knowing the buyer beforehand. I would say, I'm like almost thinking of the last topic of, people, they'll say that they're spending their time like researching the account. And I'm like, then I hear the call and they're like, they don't drop any details. It is for sure important to understand the buyer. The main thing, one of the huge things that I see left out, let me say it like that, is people, they don't research at all, but especially they don't research the context of how this person came in. People just don't come in today, meaning from an inbound perspective. They're taking action after action after action after action after action. Webinar, content, download, event, saw you there, saw you here, talk to someone about you. There was, someone was mentioning you at dinner, then they talked to someone else and blah, blah, blah. And then they inbound. And a lot of times, especially if you have an inbound qualifying process where an SDR is having a call with them beforehand, and asking them questions, those are one of the most high risk situations. I would for sure not recommend it. And if you're going to do it, poor SDR, if you're mandated to do it, you have to find an unknown. If you don't, you are at high risk. Again, you're wasting your prospect's time. You're just wasting your prospect's time. But the bigger slap to the face is when they get on the call with the AE, I would say I'm going to be nice and say 9 times out of 10, the AE hasn't even listened to the call or the context beforehand. At minimum, you have to understand the context of how they came in and who they've talked to already with you. They're not viewing your company as different people. They're viewing, regardless if it's someone from HR or it's someone from you or it's someone else in the customer success team, and their entire head, it's like Verizon, right? So when they have a call with an SDR and they're asked some pointless questions that were qualifying questions, how much money do you have? Do you have budget? What's your timeline? Blah, 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 that are insulting and add zero value. And then they have to wait another week to talk to you and heaven forbid you reschedule. If they have to repeat those answers to the same awful questions, I mean, they're livid. And they should be, guys. The reason they're doing research is because we don't. Meaning, I mean, 82%, like buyers trust 3% of sellers. 3. They're 82% of buyers are proactively dissatisfied with what they learned on a cold call or discovery call, meaning the amount of knowledge that the rep had. 42% of reps say self-admit that they didn't even have enough information before they made the cold call. They, by and large, and they're correct about it, they're like, I haven't found any value here. So the only thing that you can do to make that worse of they haven't had value, there is, bad questions that have been asked to them, is making them repeat those answers and not realizing that they are having to repeat those answers. And kind of a key tip here, there's a lot of people that I'll hear at the beginning of calls, and they'll say, oh, so I did a little bit of research on your company and on the call before. So what brought you in today? I'm like, Brendan, they already said that on the last call. So instead of just saying that, it can't just be lip service. You need to have actually listened to the context of the call. It's one of the most effective things you can do with your time. Of like, instead of thinking about like, let's put aside the math for prospecting for a second. If I was thinking about which one, if I could spend time booking 3 more meetings a month, or I could take my close rate from 6% to 20, which is more effective in the long term, the close rate. And part of that is how much research do you do on the context. A lot of their problem is they don't think that the seller knows anything, which is why point number 1 is learn about the buyer. But another piece is, and why point number 2 on buyer follow-up is important, is everything that you do, everything that you say, everything that you don't do, everything that you don't say, communicate something. And if you come in, heaven forbid if it's late, you're a couple minutes later, how to reschedule or whatever, from their perspective, and their perspective is reality. You have to keep that in mind. They're like, they've just gone through this brutal qualifying process. They've had to self-educate and learn all these things about solving their problem because they don't think that a seller will be able to help them. And then you come in and then you don't know any information of even how they've interacted with your own org. That's really, really bad. So instead of just giving the lip service of, well, I've listened to your call, or I think I know a couple things about your company, in this day and age, you are guilty until proven innocent in sales. And I think that's fair, honestly. Like, I think that's really fair. Of like, people say, I'm really impressed by your profile. I'm like, what are you impressed by? Or people say, I notice you're growing. I'm like, how would you know that? In headcount, I hire all agencies. So it's not in headcount. I'm like, I'm certainly not public, so you don't know my number. So what do you mean by growth? And I'm like, it's a BS. I'm sorry. I'm just going to say it. It's a bullshit line. Just lying, like you pretending that you know me, or pretending that you've researched me. I don't care if you've researched me necessarily, but the only thing that can make it worse is if you lie about it. So instead of saying like, I listened to this call, I would give just an equip, because it relieves them. At minimum, it relieves them that you actually have you've taken the time to understand where they're at and what they've already said, so they don't have to repeat themselves. They're worried. They're worried that if you don't have a certain amount of information, potentially it can make you vend the wrong thing that they won't be able to solve their problem with. So I'll hear buyer time after time after time have to fight over the seller to be like, no, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I heard this on a call the other day. They're like, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. And I pause it. I'm like, they're having to interrupt you and apologize to get information to you because they think it's going to affect what they should buy. And they're correct. Why are they having to fight you? right? So I would at minimum mention some of that information, that it relieves them, that you have at least, that they know that you have researched the call. Sometimes I'm asked questions at the end of sessions, and some people, they'll ask me a question that communicates to me that they weren't listening the whole time. They'll be like, what do you say about hyper-personalization? I'm like, Brendan, I just went into hyper-personalization does not freaking exist, and it's personalization and relevance, and personalization is one-to-one, relevance is one-to-many regardless of the cohort, and that you have to personalize, otherwise you won't interrupt the pattern. You're going to have a 0.5 to 0.7% reply rate. I just talked for an hour about that, and you're asking me what's the difference between, or my thoughts on hyper-personalization. When you ask questions like that, and you won't know, at minimum you need to reassure them. And how you can do that is simply by saying, hey, so thanks so much for giving me the time today. I caught a little bit of it up on the context. I know that you were on a call with whatever Brendan earlier, and you mentioned that you were trying to expand, and that you were trying to expand within the next couple of quarters, and you were looking for something to support your infrastructure with your team of 17. What I don't know is why. Could you walk me through a little bit of, and then ask the question? But what you're doing with that couching is essentially you're communicating to them, I did my homework, so you can trust me. They're not trusting you because they're bad people. They're not trusting sellers because typically they can't. Right? Even if a seller knows a lot of information and knows what to diagnose, if a doctor knows a lot of information, has expertise, but they haven't asked the questions or don't have the right information or enough information, they still can make the wrong call. And that's what people are worried about. So at the beginning of the call, I would give a couple of details on the last call, or you can give a couple of details on the company. I think I have a good understanding what you do. So your real estate software management, am I in the right ballpark? And they're like, yeah. And you'll see this sweet relief come over their face, and they start to open up because they know that you've invested in them first. Right? So those are the two things that I would do. Research the company, research the person. But here's my last caveat. I give myself no more than 4 minutes before the call to research the person, no more. I'm like, who are they? Where have they been? How long have they been in the org? I want a skinny. I want details. I want years. I want dates. I want role. I want to know the entire thing. And then I've listened to the call research, and then I've looked up what they do. All of that, the account research and the persona research should take no more than 10 minutes. The call research should take no more than 10 minutes as well. And that will set you up for a beautiful call. Now, you don't know which pieces you're going to mention and when, and I wouldn't go on a laundry list and be like, I did my homework. These are the things I learned about you. Just drop them casually at the beginning, at the beginning for the context, but then throughout ad hoc. So it reassures them of like, hey, I've done my research. So they're more open to ask good questions. Now, that's just the first part. Asking the good questions to find unknowns is what has to come next after that. Pizza pie slice 5. Pizza pie slice 5. Day in the life of an. I bet you everyone was logging on this episode. How's everyone out there? Y'all doing okay? Jump the tide. I want to hear y'all doing okay. I bet I was trying to make a joke, even though it probably didn't come across, of like, you see the day in the life on LinkedIn. First, I worked out, blah blah. I'm like, day in the life video, and everyone's probably like, yeah, this is gonna be fun. And then I'm like, self prospect, hit your metrics. The least fun day in the life ever. Okay. So that is the 5th lap. Let's go ahead and go into lap 6, and then we're going to close out. So the first one was what to do and learn. Research your buyer 15 minutes a day. The second was buyer follow-up within 24 hours, and you're sending over helpful guides, not session recap, but helpful guides and stuff that you owe them. Then we went into this structure and protecting against non-revenue generating activities, and we did self-prospecting and account research. The last one I want to go into is what activities should happen and when. So what activities should happen and when? In terms of my calendar, I am very tight about my calendar. So anything that, and I would, if I were you, I would focus on, I would put an actual calendar reminder in my calendar for the morning time. First thing that I do is for 15 minutes is to learn about my buyer in the first thing in the morning, for sure. And I would put that in here. And here's the thing, you cannot skip it. You cannot skip it. If you skip it, then, and it's a slippery slope. You skip it once and then you skip twice, and then all of a sudden you don't do it at all. You're not in the business of setting calendar reminders. You're in the business of putting calendar reminders in there so that you actually do the activity. So you can do a re ad hoc at the end of the week and be like, okay, how many of these did I actually do? But 15 minutes at the beginning of your day, for sure, you research your buyer. The next calendar reminder that I would put in there, and a lot of times I do this beforehand, meaning I'll do it on the way there or while you're running or whatever it is I would listen to webinars and podcasts, and while you're like in transit or on your way, I would listen to your own calls. So part of coaching, coaching should hypothetically come from your leader, but I would not take anything for granted. The world owes you nothing. And especially you have to keep in mind, you're one of the highest paid people internally at the org, and everyone knows that, right? So in terms of coaching, I would take it as it's a nice thing to have, but you need to self-coach and listen to what you're saying and what you're doing and what your buyer said. So I would put at least 15 minutes, and I would do it in transit so you don't lose any work time to do this, of listening to your own calls and listening to your buyer. What you think you said and what you actually said are completely different. I have been astounded. I have no marker sometimes. Sometimes I'll jump off a podcast and I'll be like, man, I crushed it. And I'm like, I listen back to it. I'm like, that was awful. I was so fast. And I stumbled over my words or whatever it was. Sometimes I thought I've done horrible. I'm like, that was horrible. And then I listen back to it. I'm like, actually, that wasn't that bad. So it does two things. Number one, it helps you understand what you sound like and what the buyer journey is. And number two, it helps you understand what the prospect's reaction was to that. Of when you take yourself outside of it, a lot of times when I do call reviews, I will, I'm like, okay, whoever the rep is, let's say it's Adam. I'm like, Adam, we're going to pretend like this isn't your call. It's not for Adam. It's for everyone, right? I'm like, you need to take yourself out of these shoes. I'm going to play this portion for 2 minutes on the call. And I want everyone to write down on their notepads, what questions did you have for the prospect about what they said in this 2-minute portion? So I do that. And then I'm like, okay, so what outstanding questions do you have? And they'll all chip in, including Adam. But then when I lift it off of play, they start talking. They go straight into, well, that's great. This is what we do. But they didn't realize that they did that until they listened back to it. And once they could step out of their own shoes, they know the questions to ask, right? So I would spend 15 minutes at least listening to your own calls, if nothing else, so you can be reminded of what happened in the call. I know that there's recording software. Everyone hits me with that. Oh, well, there's recording software. I'm like, yeah, but recording software doesn't write down everything. I'm giving you an example. I'll give you an example of what a business problem is or a impact is. The persona is not going to say, this is my business problem. You have to ask the questions of what's your lagging indicator, goal, and achievement. And now you know the business problem, right? So I would, when I'm throughout within a call, I actively take notes. If nothing else, it makes the prospect have the expectation they're going to talk. So when I'm running through those calls and I'm listening to them, I hear different stuff. So that's the second thing that I would make sure that I do. In terms of self-prospecting, I would set up on Monday and Tuesday, I say 1 hour, but I think honestly that's being so light, of 2 I would do it 1 to 2 hour block, not where you're prospecting, where you're doing the account research, where you're doing the prospect research for the personalization, and you're crafting the emails and you're getting everyone loaded in sequences. When you need to send those is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday afternoon, when it's smartest to develop all of that, of like writing, when you write the email and when you send the email are two different conversations, right? So I would do a 2-hour prospecting block of like Monday mornings, great, because no one is going to pick up the phone. That's when all the reps are making the calls, and that's when no one's going to pick up the phone. Not only because they have all the sludge from the week, that you have to be such a higher priority on Monday morning than you would have to be Friday afternoon comparative to get their attention. Their attention is relative to what they have going on, and Monday morning is the worst time to do it. So Monday and Tuesday, I'm like, if you want to talk to me from an internal perspective, if you want to talk to me or you want a meeting or whatever, it's got to happen Monday. I'm not letting it happen in this back half, because that is when we are doing revenue generating activities. So for Monday and Tuesday, I would do a 2-hour block. If it were me, a 2-hour block of prospecting activity, but it is, you're generating all of the account research and the prospect research and writing the emails. And then I have a 1-hour block Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Honestly, I would do 2 hours for those two, but I'm being nice. And I would do Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday afternoon in terms of calls. So meaning when I'm making the actual cold calls. So in terms of activity, Monday morning is for meetings. Every single morning, do 15 minutes where you're learning about your buyer. Every single day, I would try to do 15 minutes where either outside of the workday while you're running blah, blah, of listening to your own calls and learning about your buyer. And if you have any internal meetings, I would do those on Monday as well. One thing that is, there's two things that have to be a must. One, unfortunately, does have to take priority. You cannot leave the day. You have a 24-hour span to follow up with people. And I cannot stress that enough. If someone inbounds, the statistics are pretty clear. You have no longer than 5 minutes to reach out to them. Otherwise, you see drastic drop off. Same day meetings are the best. One day you're going to see a dip of 15%. 2 days you're going to see a dip of 5 to 10%, and on we go. Basically, after 4 days, if that meeting is scheduled for 4 days out, you can kiss it goodbye. So inbound requests that are coming in and buyer follow-up, you have to do that within 24 hours. You have 24 hours to do that. And if you're selling to a committee, you have to keep in mind any meeting that you have, I would suggest, if you're asking the buyer first, hey, I noticed that these people, do you mind if I send them over a piece of content? Not about your product, not about who you are, but something that it might be helpful in the day. You have to send that 24 hours beforehand of like, hey, I was talking to Tara earlier and she said she didn't mind if I reached out to you. So I'm excited to meet you on the call later. I thought you might like this article just in prep for our time on blah, blah, blah. No need to look at it or respond. I'm excited to meet you, but I'm here if you need anything in the meantime. Just that makes them know who you are and makes them know that you're there from the beginning. So however you stack your day, you cannot leave 24 hours. You have 24-hour window to send a buyer follow-up after discovery. I would say an inbound request, and you don't need to do it necessarily immediately. You just need to calendar it immediately. You need to get back to them immediately. And 24 hours before certainly a committee meeting, you have to ask your main buyer first if you can do this. You don't go around them to blow trust. But 24 hours beforehand, I would send a meeting to those committee members with no need to respond. Here's something I thought you might like. If you need anything, I'm going to be there in the meantime. Other than that, I'll see you Thursday at 2. So that from a timing infrastructure. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday afternoon, I would be hammering those calls and emails. People say that people don't pick up on Friday or make calls. I'm like, no, you don't. Everyone picks up. It's just are we calling? I kind of tied with the timer that time. Let's be honest. I don't think I get a medal for that. I don't think I get a medal for that. That is everything. Friday the 13th. I mean, this was a gritty topic, but a very necessary topic. I hope everyone is out there. I hope everyone has some scary movies planned to watch. Speaking of gruesome, there's some ice hockey going on in the background here, so maybe we'll get in a couple of fights. I am going to tomorrow. I'm going to be going to Skeleton, which is going to be Absolutely bananas. I wanted to go see skeleton for a very long time. For anyone who doesn't know what skeleton is, essentially it's called skeleton because it's the skeleton of a bobsled. It's a bobsled, but it's basically, think of it like a boogie board. But they're going on their stomach face first down the bobsled track at 90 miles an hour. So if you fall, ooh, if you slip, not good. I watched a video of one girl and she said, you just have to admit at one point, you have to just be completely okay with the fact that you're not in control. I'm like, sounds about right. So anywho, I will be watching that tomorrow. And I will see you tomorrow for our next session where we're going to, so that was day in the life of a top performing AE. And then tomorrow we are going to be going into a very apropos topic to what I was talking about, inbound, why that is the solution to all of the problems and how we're only converting on average 9%. 9%! All that time on marketing to convert 9%. It convert 9% of leads, just get a meeting with the AE, not even close. Keep in mind the close rate is 7 times higher, and they're going to go with the person who gets back to them first. But another rant for another time. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Happy Friday the 13th. Tomorrow is the 14th, which makes that Valentine's Day. So if you don't have Valentine, you better find one tonight. Google, look one up. I will see you tomorrow for the day of love. But for now, it is Friday the 13th, so watch your back. Okay, talk to y'all later. Arrivederci, everyone, and I will see you soon.